Welcome back to K-Nation. Summer's a big time for coaches to recruit, so we have someone who keeps track of all of that craziness joining us today.
Yeah, Derek Young from K-State Online is joining us to break down the craziness, like you said. Derek, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, as always, thanks.
Yeah, so the summer, as we've seen, coaches have been going out. The Tang Gang has been rolling 4 and 5 deep sometimes at these recruits games. Just who should fans be keeping their eyes on for football or basketball this year, hoping that they become a Wildcat?
Yeah, the big stuff right now is probably the football stuff for Chris Kleiman and company. They got 2 recruits that they're really kind of zeroing in on at this point. One from the state of Kansas, and Michael Boganowski of Junction City. He's going to visit all 3 of Kansas State, Kansas, and Oklahoma in the next couple of weeks, so maybe we'll find a conclusion about where he's going to go to school.
Yeah, he's a name that I've been hearing bounced around a lot.
Well, as far as recruiting goes, you know, obviously K-State was good enough with the players they have to win a title last season, but this is for football and basketball. When you have teams that go far, you know, win a Big 12 championship, make the Elite Eight, how does recruiting change as far as players that you're able to get?
Yeah, I would say for Kansas State basketball especially, they were starting to get into living rooms that otherwise they probably couldn't a year ago when they were still trying to establish themselves. So it's kind of having a bigger profile at this point. You know, for football, you're recruiting against the likes of Oklahoma, Nebraska, even Alabama, and a few different cases in the last 12 months. So the profile is really elevated for both programs. And when you look at Jerome Tang and Kansas State basketball, they're recruiting against Duke, UConn, who just won a national championship, KU, they beat out David Castillo for. So the profile is certainly elevated for both the football and basketball programs.
And now that football's been practicing a little bit, this freshman class has some big local guys in it and some other guys just from around the country that we've been following through their recruitment. What have you heard about them and their development as they become college football players?
Yeah, certainly Avery Johnson is a household name that everyone remembers from Mays High School. Just a year ago, set all the records, was probably the best player in the state by a very wide margin. He actually enrolled at campus in January, so he's been at Kansas State for 6 or 7 months. Obviously, they know who their quarterback is already, and Will Howard. But Avery Johnson, a guy with the speed and the playmaking and the athleticism that might be hard to keep off the field. Now, he's not going to play a lot of quarterback, if any, but a guy with that speed and ability to make things happen when the ball is in his hands. You have 4 games while you can still redshirt, so they might take that into consideration and utilize it.
That is so beneficial having those 4 games.
And then, you know, a guy like Avery Johnson, where K-State Twitter was hammering it, like, you need to come here, and now he's going to sit behind Will Howard. What have you seen from Avery Johnson to keep those fans excited for the homegrown kid?
Yeah, it's certainly everything you saw when he was in high school, whether he can, really rip it through the air with his arm. But you'll probably see first and foremost his speed and athleticism. He's a guy with a lot of twitch and explosiveness, really a threat to score every time he touches the ball. So when he makes an impact at Kansas State, it'll first probably be with his legs before the arm. But I think both will come at some point.
And is there any freshmen who you think we could actually see on the field this year a little bit? I know football rosters are huge and redshirting is so common now for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I think defensively there's probably maybe a bigger opportunity. When we spoke to a lot of the players and head coach Chris Kleiman at Big 12 Media Days in Arlington, they talked a lot about Austin Romaine, a linebacker from Missouri, which really wasn't even on our radar at that point. Even at linebacker, you're probably thinking Asa Newsom, who was a 4-star that they signed from the state of Iowa. So Austin Romaine is kind of, probably flown under the radar, but kind of rose to the surface. And Kenigel Thomas, a cornerback that we've heard a lot about. Chidi Obiazor, a defensive lineman out of Minnesota. He got there in January with a lot of work to do, but just had a great offseason, someone that could push for playing time as well.
And then while we have the time, you got the podcast, the 3 Mile podcast with the other K-State Insider guys. Give us a little plug. What are you guys talking about this summer?
Yeah, well, we're probably really going to start to get into the preview series and start really breaking down position by position, maybe even games, see where we think Kansas State will fall in the Big 12 pecking order when we're sitting here in December, because we did that last year, kind of just a projection. Now, I think we got the record wrong. I think all 3 of us were kind of at 10-2, but we all did have Kansas State making the Big 12 championship game. So maybe we'll see where we have them this year and see if we can kind of have a good foreshadowing moment once again.
Wow. What do you think about K-State's schedule really quick?
Yeah, the schedule is interesting. I think in ways they didn't get a lot of favors because of who they play on the road. I think Oklahoma State on a Friday night is going to be an interesting game at an interesting part of the schedule. But if you look at their 7 home games in Manhattan this year, all 7 very winnable. So you go undefeated at home, you leave yourself a lot less work to do on the road, which is obviously more challenging. And you could be sitting there in Arlington in the first week of December, just like you were a year ago.
Yeah. All right, Derek, thank you so much for joining us. And you guys stick around because there is more K Nation after the break.